Part 91. Cannon Fodder Strategy. Author, Juan ERWR. Chapter 902. In fact, the socks were no longer good or bad at this moment. But Mr. Wen felt guilty. When he saw everyone looking at his feet, he subconsciously curled up his legs, trying to hide his feet under his thighs. This proved more and more what he was hiding in his heart. Resentment appeared in the eyes of the people around him. The fat middle-aged man suddenly clenched his fists. He rushed forward and punched Mr. Wen in the face, shouting sternly, "You pay for my apprentice's life." His apprentice was the round-faced young man who was swallowed alive by the snake in the secret passage. He was also the first person to die after entering the ancient tomb. The middle-aged man entered the ancient tomb all the way. Tomb's apprentice died first, and he almost lost his own life one after another. It was only then that he discovered that Mr. Wen and his wife were lying. He almost spit out a mouthful of blood in his heart, his teeth made a rattling sound, and his eyes were bloodshot. The veins on his fists burst out, he grinned as if he wanted to kill someone, and his fists fell on Mr. Wen's face like raindrops. Mr. Wen is just a teacher, and his body is not strong to begin with. This middle-aged, fat man is a Taoist priest, and his physical fitness is not bad. In addition, he is angry and attacks Mr. Wen immediately. He was still alive, but after a few punches, Mr. Wen was beaten to the point where blood spurted out from the corners of his mouth, and he was sprayed with gunshots in his mouth. "Don't hit my husband, don't hit my husband." Seeing this scene, Mrs. Wen shouted like crazy, reaching out to grab the middle-aged man, crying and begging, "Please, please let my husband go. We have no choice. My daughter Kanya went into this ancient tomb. You should understand. You should understand us. We have no choice." She reached out to grab the middle-aged man who was beating, crying until she was out of breath, and occasionally glanced at Lily with some complaints, as if blaming her for shaking off the matter. "We understand you. Do you understand that you and your wife have done such a heartless thing?" Tang Quan was so angry that he was trembling all over. He was old and had experienced many things. "Although I was scared when I encountered the snake at the other end of the high platform, I was able to calm down. Now I heard Mrs. Wen shouting like this, and then I thought about the behavior of the Wen family, but I couldn't bear it anymore. With so many people dead, and many others trapped in those stone chambers, where is your conscience? Aren't you afraid of retribution?" He shouted these words to several people who had lost relatives. They couldn't help crying. The middle-aged man who was beating him stopped in despair, and pushed the dying Mr. Wen to the ground. Mr. Wen just lay there gasping for breath, but his eyes were dull. After a long time, he stretched out his hand to cover his face. He looked like a grown man and scratched his hair again. At this moment, he burst into tears. "What should I do? If Chang Sheng dies, how should I explain it to his parents? His parents only have one son. What should they do if they don't have money to support him until he is old?" At first, when the young man named Chang Sheng died, the middle-aged man comforted himself that as long as he survived, once the Wen family gave the money, his apprentice's parents could still rely on this rich money to enjoy their old age, at least without the evening scene was desolate, but I didn't expect to hear that these two people were lying just now. All kinds of negative emotions surged up in his heart in shock. I couldn't help but burst into tears. I know what we are doing is wrong, but there is no money. My daughter will not be able to come back, and we are really forced to have no choice. That's why we came up with such a solution." Mrs. Wen was very happy. Tears fell straight down, and then he sniffed. "But we are not heartless people. After we go out, we will work hard to make money and compensate you." "That's nice to say," someone yelled angrily. The Wen couple originally talked about 500 million in remuneration. If it weren't for the money, who would be willing to accompany them into this fatal situation? This place is simply there is a situation of no return, especially after entering the ancient tomb. Everyone felt this deeply. So many people died not long after arriving. This ancient tomb was such a big deal, and now we have just entered the ancient tomb. I don't know how difficult it is to get out. Even if they are lucky enough to survive, how much money can these two couples earn from working? It's not even enough to compensate the families of the deceased, so how can we have the money to compensate them? As for your daughter Wenkanya's life, other people's lives are just grass, right? Wen and his wife were surrounded by a group of people and apologized. Everyone was extremely angry. At this moment, Lily suddenly shouted, "Stop arguing now." Everyone was angry. It was Lily who had brought up this topic in the first place, and now she said not to argue. Everyone had nowhere to vent their anger. After hearing her words, some people couldn't help but say, "You fart. It's your turn to speak here, I can't explain this." Before he could finish his words, something happened in the venue, and the painful sound of sex seemed to ring from everyone's ears. This kind of sound that seemed to be struggling before death was just a vague sound at first. Everyone thought that they were hearing hallucinations due to fear, and it was as if they had heard the tinnitus wrongly, but then the ground a large number of ashes began to float without wind. Except for the group where everyone was sitting around, the black air around them seemed to have condensed into substance. The white bones hanging upside down above everyone's heads in the black mist seemed to come to life and began to shake. He stood up, and the screams started from sporadic, and then became more and more frequent. Woo! Crying and painful moans came. The group of people who had been so noisy just now suddenly stood up with chills. The samadhi true fire that was originally burning on the white bones began to shake violently, as if everyone was the white bones in her hand were shaking, and there was a click sound as the bones collided with each other above her head. Mrs. Wen was so frightened that her face turned blue, and she subconsciously moved closer to her husband. Both of them moved closer to Tang Quan in unison. He asked in a trembling voice, What's going on?" Everyone was noisy just now, but now it was so quiet that only faint moans and wailing could be heard from the mountains. The hearts of everyone were beating hard, Lily's heart was heavy, and resentment was clearly starting to appear all around. It has strengthened, even to the point where it has affected the flow of Taoism in her body. So many people have died here, and these people may have suffered inhuman torture before they died. Therefore, the resentment is so heavy that it seems to be in substance. This time there is some trouble. "Help me!" A young man with medium long hair suddenly shouted out a cry for help. At first, everyone thought he was frightened by the environment here and went crazy, so they did not take his words seriously. Keep it in mind, in such an environment, if they had a choice, everyone would want to ask for help and leave quickly, but the problem is that it is easier to get in now, but harder to get out. But the next moment, the young man's face turned blue at first, and then turned darker. Gradually, under the horrified eyes of everyone, his body seemed to be lifted up by several invisible giant men. First, he floated directly off the ground in mid-air, and then at an extremely slow speed, he began to turn head down and feet up. During this period, the young man's expression was dull, as if his true expression had been hidden under a piece of flesh. Suddenly he flushed red, and his eyes began to become engorged rapidly, but his expression was strangely cold. His skin was smooth, red, and shiny, as if it had been waxed. I wonder if it was because of the congestion. The rusty iron hooks above his head hooked into the soles of his feet. The shoes on his feet had fallen somewhere during the previous run. He was hung upside down like a pig waiting to be slaughtered. On the shelf, waiting to be disemboweled. But the young man's expression was very calm, almost a little indifferent. When the iron hook dug into the sole of his foot, the sound of tearing through the bones and flesh rang in everyone's ears, and the dark red blood on the tip of the iron hook trickled down drop by drop. As he fell, everyone seemed to feel pain in the soles of his feet, but he seemed to feel no pain. He neither shouted loudly nor struggled desperately, but made painful and helpless moans from his mouth. It would be fine if he showed a bit of pain on his expression, but his calmness coupled with this painful cry seemed to make people see that what was hanging upside down in front of them was just a dummy that could pronounce words. People feel a little creepy. What's going on? All this happened in a flash of lightning. Just because of fear, the process of the young man being hung upside down seemed to be stretched out. When everyone came back to their senses, the young man had been hung up neatly, and began to sway gently in the air like a white skeleton hanging upside down next to him. The screams around him seemed to be getting louder and harsher. Several people present were so frightened that they couldn't help but swallow their saliva. The next moment, the young man's hands that were originally clamped on both sides of his legs seemed to have been forcibly broken off. They were clamped on both sides of his cheeks and fell down. A big hole was opened in his fingers for no reason, and blood began to flow along his fingers, tick tick tick, it's dripping down. The rich smell of blood came from the surroundings, and the black fog around seemed to be more explosive. The sound of gunshots in the ears became louder and louder. The light of the bone torches held in everyone's hands was forced to become dimmer and dimmer, and they looked like they were at any time. It will look like it will go out. A large pool of blood quickly dripped on the ground where the young man was suspended, splashing everywhere. The blood began to flow slowly in all directions like a stream, like small winding snakes, heading toward everyone. The direction flowed over. "We can't stay here for long," Lily couldn't help but smile bitterly in her heart when she saw this scene. At first, when she saw so many corpses here, she just felt that the resentment here was very strong, and she felt that this place was dangerous, so she wanted to leave quickly without even planning to save everyone. At this time, the resentful spirits revived, and she discovered that this place was full of resentment. The danger is far greater than you imagine. To be continued. Cannon Fodder Strategy. Author, Juan ERWR. Chapter 903. These grievances have existed for many years, and are full of yin. There are so many people who have died here. The young man probably has the least knowledge, so he fell easily. Lily originally wanted to regain her strength, but how can she do it now? Dare to stay, stood up to greet people and was about to leave. The middle-aged Taoist nun named Mu was a little desperate. Go? Where to go? There is no road here. As he spoke, more and more blood flowed out of the young man's body. His face began to turn gray quickly, his eyes were red, and there was a look of despair and fear in his eyes. But his expression was so calm that it made people feel a bit hairy. The blood on his fingers spurts down. This situation is not normal. Logically speaking, even if the fingers are connected to the heart, no matter how fast the bleeding speed is, it will not be like the current situation, as if it is like 10 small faucets. As the water was released, the blood seemed to come to life and was divided into dozens of strands. The blood flowed like a snake toward the crowd. Black mist also swarmed up from behind. I don't know if it was an illusion, but everyone seemed to be able to see it vaguely. Many upside-down painful faces were looming in the black mist. Go to the middle, there is a well in the middle. Just when she was at the top, Lily discovered something strange about this place. There were bones hanging all around, and there was a well in the middle. The original design of this ancient tomb was that yin energy and spiritual energy coexisted, and the place of death, maybe it is connected with life. The blood flow here is fierce and the resentful spirits are dense. Maybe that well is the only line of life for everyone for the time being. The blood had a strange smell and was so fishy that it almost made people spit it out when they smelled it. It was hard to tell what it tasted like. It didn't look like fresh blood at all, but rather like a corpse that had been rotting for several years. Moreover, blood was pouring towards everyone, and Lily instinctively had a premonition that it would be very troublesome if she got exposed to this blood. She was indeed right, because Lily said this. The surrounding black mist seemed to be irritated, and began to squirm crazily, much faster than before, crawling towards everyone like a spiritual snake. Standing at the edge was a girl about 20 years old, wearing a sportswear. Her feet were first stained with a trace of blood, and she let out a frightened scream. The next moment, the blood crawled up her legs. This was beyond the scope of what everyone could take seriously, and the most surprising thing was the place where she had been crawled. The pants turned into nothing, and the white and tender skin on her calf began to rot rapidly. After a while, it was as if a section of her calf had been skinned alive. The girl took one look, and then let out a sharp scream. Lily immediately ran into the black fog, and everyone was frightened to death when they saw such a scene. Anyone who dared to stay followed Lily. Mrs. Wen screamed so hard that her legs were so weak that she couldn't run at all. Mr. Wen dragged her forward. It's just that the black mist seemed to have discovered Lily's intention, and crowded around to stop her. The girl behind stood there unable to move, screaming repeatedly. Her feet were nailed into the pool, and the blood covered her. The calves then began to climb up the waist and chest, and climb higher and higher. The more bloody stool there was, the stronger the smell became. In the time it took her to take a breath, there was no intact skin left on her body. Her body was dripping with blood, but the scary thing was that she was still alive. Her face that was pretty before now looked ferocious and terrifying. She stretched out her fleshless and bloody palms towards Lily and the others, shouting in pain. "Save me, I don't want to die." Every time she spoke a word, blood flowed into her mouth. People who looked back saw that the surface of her tongue had begun to be worn away, and their hearts beat in fear. Severe. She didn't want to die, but it was obvious that there was no way to save her life. There was more and more blood. The girl stood in the blood pool for a few seconds, like a skinned frog, soaked in blood. It looked more terrifying alive than dead, and then her body began to melt quickly like ice cream under high temperatures, and finally merged with the blood into a pool. After killing a person in the blink of an eye, the blood flow became faster and faster, more than twice as fast as before. Due to the invasion of the black mist, Lily and others only ran 2 or 3 meters away at this time, and the resentment here the soul created ghosts to hit the wall, trying to trap everyone here and block their way out. Fighter. Seeing such a scene, a group of people panicked, and many people began to subconsciously shout the formula, but it had no effect. The blood speed was extremely fast, and I'm afraid the formula would still be lost. Before he finished reciting, the blood could catch up with everyone and drown them all. In such a cold place, heavy sweat broke out on everyone's foreheads. Many people's legs were shaking and washing. Mrs. Wen even leaned on her husband in such a hurry that she was so scared that she couldn't stand firmly on her feet. Emperor Suanwu is in front of us, gods return to temples, ghosts return to graves. At this critical moment, Tang Quan's expression was also very solemn. He began to recite a spell in his mouth, biting his index finger, and just followed the words in his mouth. Spell, the blood is getting closer and closer, and the black mist behind seems to have condensed into a solid wall, firmly blocking everyone. When a group of people saw this scene, their eyes showed despair. The girl named Zhao Hongxian couldn't help crying. "It's over, it's over. I'd rather commit suicide than die like this." Her words made the already anxious people even more panicked. Fear was like a contagious virus, causing many people to cry, and the scene became even more frightening for a while. Fine beads of sweat broke out on Tang Quan's head. The strong yin energy and resentment in the mountain belly made it difficult for him to speak every word. His gray hair was soaked with sweat, and beads of sweat kept dripping down. His face turned pale. After he recited the incantation, the blood flow was almost gushing in front of everyone. He turned his head and glanced at Lily, with an anxious look in his eyes. He was obviously hesitating whether the incantation he recited could stop this inexplicable blood flow. To save everyone's lives, it is better to break through this ghost wall and give Lily a chance to escape. If he could stop the blood flow, let alone whether he could do it, even if he could, he really didn't know how long Tangquan could block this weird blood flow. It will still take time to open this ghost wall, and everyone still may not be able to escape by then. It is better to break the ghost wall and let Lily escape first. At this critical moment, although this move was somewhat selfish, Tangquan could no longer care about so much. Yunbei was the only flesh and blood of his junior brother, and it was because of him that his junior brother was in jail now. He fought hard for this. Even if he doesn't care about his life, he still has to protect Lily. At worst, he will have to bear all the consequences of his sins by himself. Thinking of this, a look of determination appeared in Tangquan's eyes. He turned his head and was about to speed up the chanting of the spell. Out of the corner of his eye, he noticed that Lily not only did not escape, but instead took a step towards the blood flow and reached out from the bag. He took out a few yellow paper charms. This action almost made Tangquan's eyes roll out of their sockets in surprise. He subconsciously stopped talking, and his heart was burning with anxiety. When he regained consciousness, he subconsciously wanted to pull Lily, but as soon as he stopped the spell, the black mist even more fierce. He was so anxious that he even lost his voice in shock. He couldn't say a word at all. He was just angry that Lily was young and ignorant. She also saw the power of the blood flow just now. Not only did she not hide now, and dared to take the initiative to come forward. Tangquan's eyes were red with anxiety, but the next moment he saw Lily pasting several talisman papers in the air very quickly. There were neither walls nor objects in the air, but she posted them. Not only did the talisman paper not fall down, but it floated steadily and neatly in the air. Heaven and earth are infinite, heaven and earth are orderly, yin and yang have their own way, heaven and earth borrow laws. Lily moved her lips, and quickly recited these words of the incantation, while biting her middle finger, flicking her fingertips, and a drop of pure heaven and earth came. The blood of the Tao Te Ching was bounced out by her, split into 3 parts in the air, and landed firmly behind the talisman paper. After doing all this, her face turned slightly pale. The talisman paper did not shake after being stained with blood. It was still floating steadily in the air. When the flexible blood flowed over, when everyone thought they were certain to die, Mrs. Wen's mouth, she even let out an earth-shattering scream. Lily turned back to look at her coldly and scolded. "Shut up." Something that surprised everyone happened again. When the blood flow that looked very strange and ferocious just reached the bottom of the talisman, it suddenly seemed to be blocked by something invisible. Still. When the ghosts around saw this scene, the howls of ghosts and wolves became louder again. The face of the young man hanging upside down in the air was as pale as a bone. The blood on his body was flowing faster and faster, and the blood flow was getting stronger. He was trying to. As I climbed up, the moment I touched the talisman paper glowed with golden light. A terrible scream came from the blood flow, as if many people were greatly injured at the same time, and everyone screamed in pain. The sound shocked several people present. People felt sick and upset, and wanted to vomit, as if their souls were shaken out of their bodies by the crying. Lily saw that she had used the blood curse and the power of the Tao Te Ching to block this strange thing, and then turned around, glanced at the black mist in front of her, snorted coldly, and the 5 thunder curse gathered in her palm again. The wind and thunder are ordered to be destroyed in all directions. Break it for me. In order to increase the power of the 5 thunder curse, she used her blood to quickly draw the talisman on the spare talisman paper, and then threw it out in conjunction with the 5 thunder curse. Boom! The sound of thunder began to appear inexplicably inside the valley. Thunder is the natural nemesis of ghosts and monsters. The moment those ghosts with resentment saw Lily using the 5 thunder spells blessed by Taoism, they seemed to have encountered the most powerful person in the world. Like deadly poison, wherever the 5 thunder curse hits, the evil energy hurriedly disperses to both sides. To be continued. Carrot. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Cannon Fodder Strategy. Author, Juan ERWR. Chapter 904. Holding the trembling white bones in their hands under the power of the thunder curse, they honestly did not dare to act like monsters anymore. The originally suppressed true fire of samadhi lit up again, and the resentment in front was split open and led to the middle. The road to the well was cleared, and the people around looked at the scene in front of them, dumbfounded and unable to recover for a long time. What is going on? Yun Lily was obviously the weakest among everyone present. She was not even as good as the young man named Chang Sheng who was the first to die. From the beginning, everyone thought she joined to get money. Mrs. Wen and his wife didn't even take her to heart. The original idea was that the Wen family and his wife couldn't pay for this mission anyway, so one more person could help them find their daughter for free. Which gave them more strength and more hope, so they didn't reject Yun Lily at first, but they didn't expect that now in the situation of certain death, everyone thought that they would end up like the girl who was swallowed by blood before. At the end, when they were feeling desperate, it was Lily who took action and saved a group of people. This feeling was very weird, and the group of people still had an unreal feeling as if they were in a dream. Just as they were in a trance, they saw Lily running quickly towards the middle of the well mouth. Tang Quan was the first to come to his senses. He and Lily had been there before. When he was on the opposite steps, he encountered a snake. Lily had drunk the snake away once. Now, although Lily once again surprised him, he didn't care because he had a similar experience. Like everyone else who couldn't react at this time, he shouted, "Hurry up and leave. If you have anything to say, go to a safe place." After he finished speaking, he took the lead and followed Lily. When everyone heard this, they subconsciously looked back. I saw that the three talismans in mid-air were glowing with golden light at first, but then the light gradually dimmed. In less than 30 seconds, I am afraid they will be unable to withstand it. The most important is, on the road opened by Lily, if she ran away, those ghosts would inevitably gather again, so once everyone was awakened by Tang Quan. Not daring to delay any longer, they all just ran towards Lily with their heads down as if their parents had lost two legs. Mrs. Wen gritted her teeth, but she couldn't walk very well at this moment. Mr. Wen was so anxious that he was sweating profusely. When she saw everyone running so fast, she felt a little anxious. "Wait for us, wait a minute." But who will wait for them now? Don't talk about this life-threatening moment. Everyone discovered the truth about Mrs. Wen and his wife's deception just a moment ago. No one is willing to work for them anymore. Even if these two couples did not deceive others and really got the money, although the money is good, they still have a life to enjoy it. That's right, if you lose your life. What about money? So no one was willing to wait for them. At the critical moment, when no one came to help them, Mrs. Wen gritted her teeth. She didn't know where the strength came from, but she pulled her husband and started running forward. The couple ran at the end, with 3 pictures in front of them. The talisman paper finally couldn't withstand it, and the last ray of light on the talisman paper went out with a pop. The talisman paper spontaneously ignited without wind and turned into gray smoke floating in the air. The blood flow was like a beast coming out of the gate. Rushing towards the middle of the well, Lily stepped into the edge of the well first, and below was a long staircase, which was completely dark inside. She jumped down the steps, and people crowded in one after another. Mrs. Wen and her husband finally went up the steps. They were out of breath and their hearts almost beat out of their chests. As soon as their feet stepped onto the steps, blood suddenly rushed to their faces. Mrs. Wen let out a heart-rending scream and howled. She remembered the scene of the girl just now. She originally thought she would be drowned by the blood flow. There was a look of despair in her eyes, but the next moment when he found that the blood was flowing here, it slowly retreated as if it was being restrained again. Lily's guess was indeed correct. This well was indeed the only place of escape in the valley. She let out a sigh of relief. In just a moment, a large amount of cold sweat broke out from her body and her clothes were soaked. She pressed it firmly against her body. After she calmed down, she realized that the blood in her blood vessels was flowing extremely fast, and her heart was making a very fast and violent beating sound. When the cold wind blew in the valley, she felt the chill all over her body. The feeling came again, and Lily shivered. This should be the sequelae of exhaustion of Taoism. It scared me to death, it scared me to death. Oh, husband, Kanya, where is Kanya? I can't stand it anymore. Mrs. Wen used to be a materialist and never believed in gods and ghosts. She didn't expect to enter today. What happened in the ancient tomb continuously challenged her previous understanding. It turned out that there were not only ghosts in this world, but also such fierce and terrifying places. No wonder she wanted to go to this place to find her daughter. Everyone said that this place is a dead end and dare not come. At that time, she still laughed at these people for being stubborn. There were no ghosts in the world. It was just people's hearts that were scary and they were just spreading rumors. But she didn't expect that there were real ghosts in this world, and they were so scary. Everyone stood in the well, their bodies shaking like chaff, and breathing heavily. Many people were breathing so hard that their throats seemed to be about to smoke. They opened their mouths wide, like fish out of water, and their throats were dry and astringent, speechless. Lily sat down on the steps, took a few breaths, took out a bottle of mineral water from her backpack, drank 2 sips to moisten her throat, and then exhaled a large amount of turbid air, stood up and looked outside. In the pool outside the well, the blood seemed to come to life. It was only a small amount just now, but now it had filled about half of the pool, emitting a lot of stench, and the bones hanging above were curled up. He was hanging his body, as if groaning in pain, and where the young man was hung upside down before, the original body of the young man had long since disappeared, replaced by an old corpse that seemed to have been dried by the wind, with most of his hair even missing. It's not like he just died. When everyone saw this scene, their legs were so frightened that they couldn't stand up. The ferocity of the ghosts here far exceeds everyone's imagination. Even if these people do have some moral skills, compared with the ferocious ghosts here, their abilities are not comparable. Everyone rested for a while, and when they saw the scene outside, they became more and more frightened. Some people saw Lily sitting still, and when they saw the scene outside, they were frightened, and couldn't help but urge, "Let's go, who knows if these weird things will rush over again." These people were really frightened by the previous scene. Thinking of the fierce blood flow and the inexplicable young man who was hung upside down and died, they felt all over their bodies. My hair stood on end and cold sweat broke out on my back. I was still frightened when I thought about it, my body was shaking and I couldn't stop at all. Lily sat motionless. Mrs. Wen leaned on Mr. Wen's arms and reached out to grab the lapel of his shirt. She was so frightened that she was still hiccuping and couldn't calm down for a long time. The blood was flowing here and there. As if alive, some blood flow was just outside the well mouth. Everyone was sitting on the stone steps inside the well mouth, as if they could touch these dangerous and strange blood flows with a hand, and everyone looked unhappy. "You are so selfish. My husband and I were running behind just now, and no one helped us now that we were safe." Mrs. Wen was still trembling with fear when she thought of the previous scene. Her fear combined with panic and helplessness, she couldn't help crying out loud. "If we hadn't run so fast, we would all be dead. You still claim to be Taoist monks, but you don't have any sense of saving the world." She was really angry. Originally, the couple relied heavily on these Taoist priests. But she didn't expect that in the critical moment, none of these Taoist priests cared about the life and death of the couple, they all cared about themselves. The more Mrs. Wen thought about it, the angrier she became, but she thought she was an intellectual, and she couldn't say anything vicious. After speaking, he only blamed everyone for a while, then clattered his teeth, and huddled in Mr. Wen's arms. "If you are willing to help the world and save people, go ahead," Lily replied coldly to her. Mrs. Wen was blocked for a moment, and then she became a little unconvinced. "There are specialties in the arts." Before she could finish her words, Lily lazily increased her voice. "Sorry, I don't understand the idiom." Her attitude made Mrs. Wen turn blue with anger. She trembled for a while and then said loudly, "I don't understand this, otherwise I won't do anything to save you. Those who can do more work. If you have the ability, you should have done it. It's like my husband and I's duty is to teach. Are you done yet? Do you believe I will push you out if you keep talking nonsense?" After entering the ancient tomb, we encountered so many dangers. It can be said that this mission is more difficult than ever before. There are no dangers on the road ahead. The crisis in the rear has not been resolved yet. Mrs. Wen is still here chattering. Yes, Lily was impatient. She clenched her fist and hit the edge of the well with a bang. Everyone trembled involuntarily when they heard the sound. Lily had just cast a bloodletting spell to block the blood flow, and then everyone saw the scene of splitting the resentful spirit with the 5 thunder curse, and they also knew that she was very powerful. They were afraid that she would act carelessly in anger and smash the well. This well had existed for I don't know how many years. I don't know if it's strong or not. Now this is a place where everyone can save their lives. If it is damaged, a group of people will die. It's just that the person with the toughest fist is the boss has been fully proved again at this time. Everyone saw the scene where Lily saved a group of people just now, and naturally they didn't dare to show off their power in front of her like before. They just dared not to blame her for this punch, and then thought that Lily was angry because of what Mrs. Wen said, and everyone thought that their group was tricked by Mrs. Wen, and because of them, they are now trapped in this ancient tomb. Anger arises from the heart, and evil arises from the courage. To be continued. Cannon Fodder Strategy. Author, Juan ERWR. Chapter 905. Why are you like this? Mrs. Wen just shouted, and everyone gritted their teeth in unison. Shut up. If you say one more word, we will push you two out. This woman has lied to others, and she has the nerve to blame others for not saving her. Her own life is at stake. Who is so great as to save a liar? Mrs. Wen felt a little aggrieved when she heard everyone shouting like this. She was still a little unconvinced. When Mr. Wen saw that his wife had aroused public anger, he was deeply afraid that there was no law and democracy in this ghost place. Now these people knew that the couple had cheated. The truth about people is that I hate them enough. The two of them are just scholars. They have no skills in this place and their bodies are not strong. This place is in danger every step of the way. There is no place to escape in case they are really pushed out. There is nothing we can do against this group of people, and there is no law to punish them. They will just die unjustly. Therefore, he was deeply afraid that Mrs. Wen would anger these people by speaking again, so he pulled Mrs. Wen and signaled her to stop talking. "Mr. Tang, look." The fat, middle-aged man named Chang Sheng, his apprentice, glanced at the blood pool outside with some horror, then looked at the long stairs under the wellhead, obviously wanting to go down. But Lily was sitting still at the moment. Everyone had just been rescued by her and saw her showing her hand. At this time, they felt a little dependent on her, so they all hoped that Lily could take the lead first, but seeing that Lily was not in a good mood, she looked so good that she didn't dare to rush her, so she glanced at Tang Quan subconsciously, with a pleading look on her face. Tang Quan also felt very unsafe about this place. The blood flow was so weird that he didn't know what it was. Although this well seems to be a safe place for the time being, those blood streams dare not come over, but no one can tell how long this place can hide. After all, the 3 talismans that Lily just shot out were quickly broken by the blood streams. The blood in this blood pool seems to be accumulating more and more. It was still on the lower side of the well rim just now, but now it has reached the middle side of the well rim. If it continues to rise like a tidal wave, it floods the wellhead and everyone will be unlucky. Xiaoun, look at this. Originally, Tang Quan should be the backbone of the group, but in this dangerous place, his skills seem to be a little difficult. Lily's just exposed hand not only shocked everyone, but also shocked everyone. Tang Quan was deeply shocked and subconsciously asked Lily for her opinion. If anyone else asks, Lily could ignore it, but Tang Quan had a close relationship with the original owner. In addition, whether it was the encounter with the dragon snake or the scene where Tang Quan wanted to sacrifice himself to open a way for him, Lily felt a crush on the old man, so as soon as Tang Quan spoke, she sighed. "Uncle, you can't." Her expression was a little cold. She shook her head. In this extremely dangerous place, her calm appearance gave everyone a sense of security, making people calm down involuntarily. Lily pointed to the top of her head and said calmly, "This is a Taoist magic. The people who built the tombs hung these living people upside down on their heads and allowed them to bleed to death. The blood flowed down to form a blood pool. The blood pool must nourish something. This well in the middle of the blood pool, the resentful spirits in the blood pool dare not come over. There must be something underneath that can restrain them. This is also the reason why this place is full of resentment. These people should have been hung upside down and bled to death while still alive. Because their death was very painful and hopeless, the yin qi in this place was extremely strong, and there were so many people who died. That's why those bloody and resentful spirits were so fierce just now, plus 1,000 years have passed. The resentful ghosts are becoming more and more sophisticated in their Taoism. The blood of the young man who was carried to bleed seemed to ignite everything here. Even if Lily practices the authentic Taoism of Tiandi sect, even when the ancient Taoism was prevalent, the Tao Te Ching still remains. It can be said that the most excellent Taoist magic method exists, but the Taoist magic she just used to use the blood curse was quickly broken by resentment. What do you mean? When someone heard Lily say this, his face became more and more ugly and weird, and he asked tremblingly. Lily turned her head and glanced at the person who was speaking. When she looked at the person, she subconsciously did not dare to look at her and turned her head away. Lily then closed her eyes. In other words, there will be something more ferocious below. Evil people will be punished by evil people, and evil ghosts will be overcome by evil ghosts. The things here are so fierce. If there is no more fierce things to restrain them, why would these 1,000-year-old ghosts who died miserably be afraid of this place? What's more, the situation along the way has also confirmed this. The things encountered here are more ferocious than the last one. First, they encountered the python that was about to become a dragon, then they encountered ghosts, and then the resentful spirits. No one can tell what will happen under the well, but Lily can have a premonition that the things underneath are not simple. In such a strange ancient tomb, she didn't feel the movement underneath at all, but the chills on her back felt straight. Yes, if something goes wrong, you will become a monster. It is related to your own life. Now that Li Yangzi is not in the starry sky, if she dies, she will really die. That would be too much gain and loss, and she does not dare to take the risk. When everyone heard her words, they were all on the verge of crying, with pale faces and despair in their eyes. The white bones hanging upside down above the head seemed to be shaking more and more violently because of Lily's words. After hearing Lily's words that these people had suffered such painful sins before they died, and then hearing the vague and non-existent painful cries in the ears, a group of people were all cold, with their arms folded and looking confused. Now Lily's strength is already top-notch in the hearts of a group of people, but since she said that there is danger underground and does not dare to go down without authorization, how can anyone dare to suggest that she go on? Ms gritted her teeth and started crying. She cried for a while and complained. Since you know there is something weird in this place, why did you bring us here? She felt scared when she thought of what Lily said before. So many people died here, what she had just experienced and the fear in her heart, it finally overwhelmed her, causing her to cover her face and tremble all over like leaves falling in the autumn wind. The crowd who had started to accuse her fell silent when they heard Mrs words. Apparently they thought that Mrs words were right. At first, Lily suggested coming to the wellhead. She thought she had found an escape, but unexpectedly, he was now in a more dangerous situation. It would be fine if they saw with their own eyes what was underneath, but the most terrifying thing was the human heart. Because they didn't know what was underneath, people couldn't help but start thinking about it. The more they thought about it, the more horrified they felt. Many people holding the edge of the well with both hands, he cried out in pain. I shouldn't have come. I knew that this was a place of death. There was no return. I shouldn't have come. This cry caused everyone around to become silent. From the time 33 people entered the ancient tomb to now, they have died all the way. Many people had been killed. Lily had just broken the sarcophagus and rescued a total of 16 people from it, including Lily, a total of 17. However, in less than 10 minutes, 2 more people died one after another. Now more than half of them are dead. Except for the Wen family and his wife, everyone who survived had the same thoughts. They all regretted that they should not be greedy for money and enter this ancient tomb, but ended up like this. Alas, people die for money, and the ancients never deceived me. Tang Quan smiled bitterly, subconsciously trying to touch the pipe at his waist, but he came up empty. At that time, it fell to the ground, but something unexpected happened later, so that something that had been with him all his life was lost here. A look of disappointment appeared on his face, he patted his waist, and fell silent again. If you don't want to come over, you can get out. In the situation just now, there was no other way but to enter this ancient well. When Lily heard Mrs accusing herself, she sneered. What's more, you knew this place was dangerous from the beginning. Didn't you trick us into it too? Have I asked you why? What she said silenced Mrs and Lily stopped talking. In order to buy time to recover one's physical strength, this ancient well must be descended, because the blood pool surging on the edge is rising higher and higher, and the fishy smell is getting thicker and thicker. There is a danger of flooding in at any time. The blood in the blood pool is when she reached the edge of the well, she had to recover at least half of her mana, otherwise she wouldn't be able to cope with emergencies when she went down, and problems might arise. No one around her dared to speak anymore. Lily stood up carefully and stretched her body twice. The spiritual energy here was mixed with the death energy. If she relied on meditation to restore the spiritual energy in her body, it would be too slow. She might be overwhelmed by the blood in the blood pool. Even if she goes out of the well, the spiritual energy in her body may not be restored to 1/10. She needs to practice physical skills to help her draw the spiritual energy into her body. But it was a pity that the well was full of people at this time, and everyone stared at her, so that she could not do physical training. When Lily was thinking about ideas in her heart, something strange suddenly appeared in the blood pool. Mrs, why did you lie to me? It hurts so much, save me. The blood pool kept surging, and suddenly a figure with bloody flesh inside it climbed up with great difficulty and in a very slow manner. It had no complete skin on its body, only bloody flesh and blood remained. When it opened its mouth, a huge mouthful of blood poured in from its mouth and was spat out. This thing struggled to crawl towards the edge of the well. It seemed to be in great pain. Big waves of blood flowed down from its face that could no longer be seen. The scene seemed like soft red cream. As it crawled, it was still the visible facial features began to follow the speed of the blood flow, as if they were being slowly smoothed out. With every step, the legs were dragged in the blood pool, dragging a black and red line out of the thick blood pool. The traces came, but soon the surrounding blood slowly wrapped around her, smoothing out the traces of where she crawled. To be continued. Cannon Fodder Strategy. Author, Juan ERWR. Chapter 906. It seemed to be crawling very slowly, but in fact it was extremely fast. It took less than 3 seconds from the time it appeared to the time it climbed to the edge of the well. It widened its black and red eyes and stared at everyone present, wanting to reach out to them. Save me, pull me over. Mrs. Wen was so frightened that she screamed loudly when she saw such a scene, and the people around her trembled. At this time, they knew that it was not good for Mrs. Wen to scream, but no one could muster the courage to stop her and let her stop barking. Whether it was the narrow path between the mountain walls, or the scene where the young man was hung upside down, or the girl was engulfed in blood, everyone knew that there was a ghost causing trouble here. However, although they knew that there was a ghost, they did not see it with their own eyes. The ghost appeared, and the scene of the bloody man at this time simply gave people nightmares. It made people see its appearance intuitively, and it broke everyone's defenses in one fell swoop. Mrs. Wen cried and screamed, waving her hands desperately. "Don't look for me, don't look for me, it's none of my business, it's none of my business, you can find someone else, don't call me, help me, someone will save me." She waved and hid her hands desperately, and there were many people around her who might as well have been caught by her. The beautifully manicured oval-shaped nails on her hands scratched a few tiny blood marks on the cheek of the middle-aged woman named Mu sitting next to her. "Come." The middle-aged woman surnamed Mu subconsciously reached out and covered her face. The wound was covered with bright red blood. She gritted her teeth and wiped the blood away. Normally, scratching a woman's face would naturally make people angry, but at this critical moment, when everyone's lives were at risk, the middle-aged woman surnamed Mu naturally didn't care to talk to her anymore. She just wished she could curl up into a ball and hide in the well. Holding Zhao Hongsheng in her arms, she gritted her teeth and did not even dare to make a sound. "Why didn't I come to you? Don't you like me like this? Mrs. Wen. Look at me, do you like this?" The ghost thing covered in blood shouted faintly, and suddenly its bloody face flashed, and it suddenly turned into the appearance of the young girl who was swallowed by the blood a moment ago. A cute baby face paired with its dark red body that seemed to have been skinned alive became even more weird. Mrs. Wen's cry became even more miserable. Its face was very stiff, like a wax man, with white skin. It is red, and the color is as white as low-quality porcelain, with no luster. The skin also looked very rough, but the two blushes on his face seemed to be pressed with round powder puffs. Coupled with the dark eyes with a red color, under the dim light of the surrounding fire, they became more and more obvious. It was so violent that anyone who was stared at by it couldn't help but feel their scalp numb. It opened its mouth, and a large mouthful of blood spurted from its mouth. It couldn't help but raise its arms and stuff the vomited blood back into its mouth. Its white chin was stained with blood, and it grinned. When he smiled, Senbei's teeth were covered in black and red blood, and the look was simply too horrible to look at. "Do you like this?" As he spoke, blood gushed out from its mouth. It sucked some back, and the rest flowed out. It stretched out its bloody hands and struggled to hold the blood. Then he stuffed them into his mouth. After a while, seeing that everyone was silent, he couldn't help but say again. Then, "Do you like this?" The round-faced girl, whose face was stained with blood, instantly transformed into the young man who was hung upside down on the iron hook. The scary thing this time is that its head is like a young man standing upside down on its body. The top of its head seems to grow directly from its neck. At this moment, it opened its mouth and smiled at everyone. Soon blood spurted out from its mouth and began to flow down its nostrils. In a short time, its eyes and forehead were all wet. The scene was much more terrifying than before. "Spare me, spare me." Soon after someone saw this scene, their psychological defenses were finally broken, and they began to shout like crazy, grabbing their hair and crying. "I want to get out, I want to leave this place dash. Come on, come here." When the bloody corpse heard this, he smiled strangely, but the angle of his head was downward, so when he laughed, the area from his nose to his forehead was covered with blood, and his chin it was clean, but if it was at a normal angle, the corners of its mouth would be raised. Now its head is pointing downwards, and when it smiles, the corners of its mouth appear to be pulled downwards in everyone's eyes, which makes people even more frightened. The cries and trembling sounds of the crowd sounded at the same time as the howls of ghosts and wolves all around. Lily saw that these people were about to be frightened and went crazy. Without thinking, she reached out and grabbed Mrs. Wen's dirty hair and buried her under Mr. Wen's bed. The head was dragged out of the arms and slapped on it. There was a crisp sound of pop, and Lily was not merciful when she slapped Mrs. Wen. Mrs. Wen's cheeks were numb from the slap, and her ears were ringing. However, Lily's attack was very measured, and this slap made Mrs. Wen's face numb. She felt uncomfortable, but the corners of her mouth were not broken or injured, but the flesh on her cheek quickly swelled. "Can you calm down?" After Lily finished beating the person, she took out a stack of talismans from her bag and asked Mrs. Wen with a sneer. This was not the first time that Mrs. Wen was beaten by Lily, but she felt very angry every time. There were still ghosts around, so she did not dare to look out of the corner of her eyes. She stared at Lily with a pale face, and shouted in despair, "Who is it? Aren't you scared when you see this?" Others were also shouting and yelling, but Lily seemed not to hear them and hit her again. Lily didn't even raise her head when she heard Mrs. Wen's aggrieved question. "Who has cinnabar?" When she said this, several people were immersed in the fear of the appearance of the bloody corpse. They couldn't come back to listen to her words. They all covered their ears and lowered their heads, not daring to open their eyes. Opening it, Tang Quan endured the feeling of goosebumps all over his body and took out a bag from his waist. "I have it here." Lily reached out and took it, placed the inkstone on the edge of the well, and poured some cinnabar into the inkstone. Originally, the cinnabar should be mixed with chicken blood or other evil-repelling substances, but Lily planned to draw the talisman was not a talisman to suppress demons, so she just opened the mineral water bottle, poured some water in and mixed it, and then began to draw the talisman very quickly. Next to her, Mrs. Wen was still reluctant to give up. "You are not calm again. I'm not the only one, why do you always hit me?" "No reason, I just want to hit you. If you make a sound again, I will hit you again." Lily silenced Mrs. Wen until she was speechless, and then said loudly, "Shut up." After she finished drinking, not only the people around her who were crying and wanting to go out were silent for a while, but even the sounds of ghosts crying and howling outside stopped for a moment, and the surroundings were so quiet that all they could hear was the hurried shouts of people. The sound of breathing and heartbeat, as well as the rustling sound of Lily drawing the talisman, were so quiet that it made people feel hairy, and then the evil ghosts outside started to make trouble again. After drawing about 10 talismans, Lily blew on the talisman paper, glanced at the trembling people, and asked, "There is an evil spirit nearby now. It is possible that you will be affected by it and get out of this well without knowing it, just like Joe Daji, who died before, the Joe Daji that Lily said was the one who was hung upside down before. The young man who died of bloodletting." As soon as she said these words, everyone started to cry again, but they were extremely scared and could not make a sound. They only felt that their throats were dry and painful, and they were so scared that they couldn't help but bite them. He clenched his teeth, as if trying to calm down. "Now I have drawn some talismans. These are to seal your 5 senses." Lily raised the talisman in her hand and explained, "Put these talismans on and you won't be able to feel the temptation of the cries of these innocent souls for the time being. As long as you cover your ears, close your eyes, and stay where you are, nothing will happen to you. Who wants it?" This well has a restraining effect on the dead souls in the pool. They dare not come in for the time being. Therefore, in order to kill these people, some temptation methods must be used. The people who died here are full of resentment, and those who have low concentration and insufficient Taoism may be there at any time. Something will happen. As soon as Lily finished speaking, everyone couldn't help but raise their hands. I want. Mr. and Mrs. Wen also wanted it, but Mrs. Wen was afraid that Mr. Lily would take revenge, so she refused to give them the talisman. The two of them looked at each other, their eyes dilated with fear. Unexpectedly, the two of them timidly said yes in the end, but Lily still had sex. The talisman paper was in their hands. These people couldn't wait to put the talisman on it. Seeing such a scene, the bloody corpse in the pool no longer transformed into a human head to scare people like before. It let out a hum and soon returned to its previous state of blurred flesh and blood with facial features. He looked at the difference and said fiercely, "Those who can't run away, those who can't run away, I'm waiting for you to come and accompany me, come and accompany me, ah." Hearing these sharp and sinister words, everyone covered their ears tightly and huddled together with their heads buried in their chests, not daring to raise their heads. Everyone lowered their heads and covered their ears. No one was looking here anymore. Lily threw away her backpack and did a few stretching movements to stretch her muscles. After confirming that no one was looking around, she looked at the bloody corpse lightly. At first glance, the blood corpse was very unwilling to give up. Unfortunately, the blood corpse's ability could not hurt Lily. Even if she died miserably and had a lot of resentment, because of her lack of moral integrity and Lily's temperament, she had lived for many years. It was not something ordinary people could compare to, so seeing that his purpose had failed, the bloody corpse glanced at Lily resentfully and stepped back. The tranquility returned to the poolside. Lily stood on the steps beside the well and began to practice star training. She now lacked spiritual power in her body and did not want to waste time on such unnecessary waiting. People around her were frightened. Almost fainting, Lily sat down to practice physical skills 3 times in a row. The dry spiritual energy in her body was gradually replenished, and she even stopped moving when she was even slightly purer than before. To be continued. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Cannon Fodder Strategy. Author, Juan Erwr. Chapter 907. The cries of the ghosts around were still there, and the burning bones had long since been extinguished, turning into a pool of ashes falling on the steps. In the darkness, one didn't know what time it was. Lily's body was filled with mana at this time. If she had been there before, she can only release 7 or 8 5 thunder curses. Now she can not only release a few more, but as the power in her body becomes more and more refined, the 5 thunder curses she releases again will definitely be more powerful than before. She stretched out her hand and pulled off the talisman paper attached to the head of the person next to her. The place was full of yin energy, and the power of the talisman paper was gradually weakening. The paper that had been attached for 2 or 3 hours now seemed to have passed through dozens of times. It was like paper that had been dampened by the wind, and Sunday it shattered into pieces with a gentle squeeze. Almost the moment Lily's hand touched the talisman, the person she touched was shaken violently. Lily tore off the talisman from these people one by one. These people were still covering their ears. I don't know what happened. After maintaining this kind of action for a long time, their bodies became a little stiff and unruly, and these people were too scared to raise their heads at all. Lily didn't care whether these people moved or not. She picked up the bag and put it on her back again. Okay, we should go. As soon as she said these words, someone's hand trembled twice, but they still didn't dare to let go of their ears. After a while, someone asked in a hoarse voice, "No, don't you mean there is something more vicious down there?" Although it was uncomfortable to sit by the well, everyone thought about what Lily had said before about something more ferocious down there. At this time, no one wanted to go down, especially after encountering danger. It was rare to have such a few moments. Hours of peace. Someone tremblingly suggested. Stay a little longer, and find a way out of here. I don't want the money. I want to go back. We have come to this point, what else can we do? But she didn't expect that this whimsical suggestion was unanimously approved by most people. Lily smiled, seeing that none of these people wanted to see it. Like an ostrich in trouble, even though the talisman had been torn off by her, she was covering her ears and lowering her head, with her chin on her chest and refusing to raise her face. Lily stretched out her hand and snapped her fingers, causing sparks to appear. It emerged from her fingertips. The surrounding area was originally dark, but now it became a little brighter. Everyone involuntarily breathed a sigh of relief, but before they could completely relax, Lily pointed to the well. See for yourselves, if you don't leave, blood will flow in. When everyone heard this, they subconsciously turned their heads to look, and sure enough, it was true. The blood that was only in the middle of the pool before was like a rising tide for some reason. Now it has almost reached the edge of the well, and has even almost reached the edge of the well in some places. With this weak firelight, everyone saw a sea of blood all around. Without the obstruction of the talisman, the disgusting rancid smell assaulted the nostrils at this time, almost killing people, and the sounds of ghosts crying around were even louder. It was a bit bigger, and the skeleton hanging upside down above the head made a loud clicking sound. It seemed as if these things were going to fall from the top of my head at the next moment. After the talisman was torn off, the 5 senses that had been blocked before were restored. The piercing wails and the cries of the innocent soul seemed to be much louder than before. Everyone watched all this. His face was pale, and his legs were so stiff that they didn't even obey his orders. Several people tried hard to get up, but couldn't move. How to get out? A group of people seemed to be survivors trapped on an isolated island. They are surrounded by a sea of blood. The skeleton above their heads looks menacing at the moment. If the blood leaks out for a while, the well may not be safe. The surroundings, there is no place to land, and if you get exposed to the blood, you will die. Everyone looked desperate, and someone couldn't help but ask. Is there no other way? You were able to push back the blood just now. You can get some more talismans to force a way out, and we can go back along the original path. This suggestion was unanimously approved by many people. Although the previous dragon snake looked scary, it was still alive anyway, and it had left before, maybe because it had eaten and drank enough. In the end, everyone would still think of a way, which was better than facing these weird things. When Lily heard these people's words of approval, she couldn't help but sneered. You knew at the beginning that this place was a dead end with no return. What's more, the way back has been blocked by a snake. There is no way otherwise. Lily might have returned along the original road, and where would she have been? After being forced to this point, everyone fell silent again after hearing these words. Among the crowd, Tang Quan sighed and stood up first. Life and death are destiny, wealth is destiny, forget it, he had already spoken, and naturally no one dared to discuss it further. A group of people stood up with sad faces. At this time, their moods were very complicated. They were afraid of the things in the well, they were reluctant to go down, and would rather stay in this seemingly safe place for a while, but they were afraid that the dangerous blood would flow into the well. At this time, a group of people felt so regretful that their intestines were blue, and they all hugged tightly. With the backpack on his body, he followed Lily down the stairs with heavy steps. The well is about 3 meters wide, and becomes narrower as you go down. You can't see the end of the well, and a bone-chilling cold air hits you. The tunnel is pitch black, like a monster with its mouth wide open. Slowly descending to the bottom of the well, it seemed as if I had automatically walked into the monster's mouth and thrown myself into a trap. There was a big stone in my heart. Recalling what Lily had said before, that there was something ferocious down there, the group of people subconsciously slowed down their steps as they descended to the bottom of the well, all of them concentrating and not even daring to take a big breath. The bottom of the well is extremely deep from the ground. The deeper you go down, the more obvious the feeling of dampness and coldness becomes. Every breath of air is filled with thick moldy moisture. Maybe this is the heart of the mountain and is buried deep in the mountains. Underground, so the ground is slightly moist, and sometimes the feet are slightly slippery. Everyone walks very carefully. Many dense small water droplets at the top of the well about 30 centimeters above the head keep coming out, and then they gather into a ball and fall down. The ticking sound sometimes falls on everyone, and sometimes it falls on the ground, making a sound that makes people feel extremely bored, but there is nothing they can do about it. Under such circumstances, I don't know how deep the well is, but no one dared to ask. Turtle had been holding his breath for a long time, and when a group of people felt that their chests were aching due to poor breathing for a long time, the echo from the front as she grew older, Lily said calmly. "We're here." Just when everyone was tense, Leng Hui trembled when he heard the sudden voice. Lily walked in the front, and the people in the middle all had pale faces. They didn't know what was going on in front of them, and they all felt uneasy. The person walking at the end was in a very subtle mood at this time, and he was glad that he didn't have to be the first one. Facing the unknown danger ahead, they are also afraid that if the blood from the wellhead surges in, the last person will be the first to suffer misfortune. Under such circumstances, the people in the middle are also afraid. If there is danger ahead, they will have to look back. Run, there are people blocking the back. This passage is narrow in the back and wide in the front. If the people behind cannot run the next time, the road will be blocked. And if there is danger from behind, if the people in front cannot run fast, the road in the middle will be blocked. He couldn't walk either. Everyone looked sad and lifeless. Lily walked to the edge of the stairs and subconsciously held her legs. The bottom seemed to be very empty. She didn't know how high it was, but the cold hair on her back was more obvious. Later, Lily took out a mineral water bottle from her bag and threw it downwards. When the echo of clang sounded, the spring water bottle bounced on the ground a few times, making a harsh sound, and the people following behind suddenly trembled. Lily heard the echo and estimated in her mind that the stairs under the well should only be about 1 meter high. She was stretching her legs to reach out and slowly jumped down and walked along the wall. But as soon as her legs stretched out, in the darkness, a cold and soft hand suddenly stretched out and grabbed her stretched out ankle. The hand was wet and cold, and the palm seemed to be covered with mud. The moment he grabbed Lily's ankle, something like mud on the hand soaked into her ankle through her pants, and the foot immediately became numb and painful. The next moment, the hand dragged her hard, trying to pull her up. The force was so strong that Lily was almost pulled down by this hand without noticing. This little change in the darkness surprised Lily at first, but she soon calmed down. She first stretched out her hand on the edge of the well to stabilize her body, and then the force in Lily's body swam, and her ankles, the numb and cold feeling on her body, quickly faded away. Seeing that the thing holding her leg couldn't pull her down, it stretched out its other hand and hugged her leg again, quickly trying to grab her and start climbing up. There was something at the bottom of the well. Lily had guessed this a long time ago, but she didn't expect to encounter it as soon as she stretched out her legs. At the critical moment, she muttered quickly. The heaven and the earth are infinite, the universe has its own way. As she spoke, she quickly drew a talisman in the sky. Before she could take a picture of the thing below, the people behind heard her chanting the incantation. Many people were so frightened that they couldn't help but speak. Ask a question. What's wrong? Why did you recite the curse? What happened? What's going on? Say something. The people at the back didn't know what was happening in front of them, and they felt more and more confused. Under such circumstances, everyone couldn't get a response, and gradually their emotions began to get a little violent. Lily also wanted to scold her in her heart. She wanted to explain and tell these people to stop making trouble, but as she chanted a spell in her mouth, the thing crawled along her legs faster and faster, as if using her body as a ladder. Now it had climbed to her waist. A strong rancid smell hit her nose, and the disgusting touch of soft, wet, and mud-like material hung on her body. To be continued. Cannon Fodder Strategy. Author, Juan ERWR. Chapter 908. If it had been anyone else, he would have gone crazy. The lower half of Lily's body had lost consciousness. The people behind her began to push desperately. This thing was extremely powerful. Originally pulling Lily, Lily was holding the well with one hand to draw talismans and the other to maintain her body. It was already very strenuous. At this time, once the people behind her were crowded, Lily's figure became unstable, and the upper half of her body was immediately squeezed out of the edge of the well. The thing that was originally holding her waist and climbing up seemed to have seized this opportunity. Jumping up, he suddenly stretched out his hand and grabbed her neck. With a sound, a stench hit her nostrils. Lily only felt numbness in her back, as if the blood in her body stopped flowing at this moment. Her heart beat first at this moment. The beating stopped, and beads of sweat the size of soybeans appeared on Lily's forehead. At the critical moment, she finished reciting the last spell, and the talisman she drew in her hand was successful. She raised her hand and stretched it out, and patted the thing's forehead with a pop sound. Above. Get out of here. What happened? Can you get out quickly? What are the people in front doing? The blood in the back is almost flowing in. It was pitch dark down the well. In order to save Taoist power, Lily had lit the Samadhi true fire before. Everyone looked at the scene of the blood pool, but then the fire went out. Everyone along the way couldn't see the surrounding scene. They all relied on their ears and sense of smell. At this time, they smelled the putrid smell coming from the thing that rushed towards Lily before. The energy was just like the blood in the blood pool flowing down, and he pushed forward like crazy. Lily's lower body was completely numb and swollen at this moment. This thing was very powerful, but just by being hit, corpse poison entered her body. She had to be distracted to deal with this thing while at the same time stabilizing her body. Those people at the back were crowded in panic and completely lost their minds. At the critical moment, these people burst out with great force, so Lily was also pushed forward. The way to catch this thing. Hurry up. The person behind could not see the movement in front, and was so anxious that tears almost flowed out. He kept urging her, and Lily took 2 breaths. The thing that she had just slapped away with a volley of palms hit the wall with a bang sound a few seconds later, and a roar sound was blurted out like a wild beast, which made people's heads hurt violently, and their chests felt as if they were being squeezed. The huge boulder pressed down on me, and I almost couldn't breathe. The crowd that had been extremely noisy just now was as quiet as death. The people behind them shouted in despair, "What happened?" "Stay back!" Lily clasped her fingers tightly on the well wall to prevent herself from being knocked out by these people. Falling into the pit below, she put both hands on the stone wall, trying her best to stabilize her figure. The Taoist magic in her body moved quickly to drive away the corpse that quickly spread in the body after being hugged by that thing. Poison. Everyone heard her yelling to retreat, but there was no movement for a long time. The place became smaller and smaller as they entered. When there are too many people, it is difficult to retreat. You have to bend down even to walk, not to mention the dozens of people queuing up one after another. The most important thing is that the people walking behind do not want to retreat, because the blood has already flowed in from behind. The further back those who are at the end retreat, the more likely they are to die. In such a situation, people's hearts are all selfish. After seeing the tragic situation of the girl before, who would dare to touch that blood? So after Lily finished shouting, it took half a day's work. Didn't even move. Tang Quan in the crowd couldn't help but said angrily, everyone, step back, there must be a problem ahead. Anyway, she knows Taoism, so she can solve any problems. Someone shouted this from behind, and everyone heard this. Everyone couldn't help but fell silent. Tang Quan was extremely angry when he heard this. Such a dangerous place. If Xiaoun had an accident, none of us would survive. Don't forget who saved you in the blood pool before. Do you still have any conscience? You are not afraid of karma. After hearing Tang Quan's words, everyone felt guilty, but they didn't say anything, leaving him alone to curse. Lily frowned and shouted, forget it. As soon as she finished speaking, a roaring sound came again, and the rancid smell was approaching again. Lily was well prepared this time, and before the smell came, her palms were already in the air. After drawing the talisman, when she felt something approaching, she grabbed it and said, the sky and the earth are infinite, the dragon god borrows the magic. A fire dragon sprang out of the air from her palm, and she said Ang. After neighing, he walked around. The fire dragon was only the size of an ordinary chopstick from the beginning, and soon it became bigger and bigger as it jumped out, and the fire also illuminated the world under the well. When a black shadow rushed towards Lily, it was chased by the fire dragon. Going up, the fire dragon wrapped around the corpse, like a radiant whip, getting tighter and tighter. The dragon's head opened its mouth wide, and it let out bursts of dragon-like moans. The firelight illuminated the body. Lily only glanced at the entire bottom of the well, and her heart sank. The thing bound by the fire dragon opened its mouth wide, with jagged green teeth exposed, and bit hard on the fire dragon. However, this fire dragon was used by Lily with Dao power, and did not have any real the entity of the corpse monster, so after the corpse monster was handed over in one fell swoop, its teeth clanged loudly, but the fire dragon was not harmed. On the contrary, when the magic power of the orthodox Tiandamen Tao Te Ching wrapped around it, its teeth as the fire dragon swam past, the swollen and rotten corpse appeared with scorch marks one after another, giving off the strange pungent smell of putrid corpses that had been burned for many years. This corpse was purple all over, about 2 meters tall, with sparse hair, and a brown face. The insides of one of the eyes were obviously rotten, with only a layer of skin hanging in the eye sockets, and the skin seemed to be mashed by someone. It turned into a ball and looked extremely disgusting. Thinking that this thing had attacked her before, Lily stretched out her hand to take a look at the firelight, and sure enough she saw traces of its rotten facial skin on the palm of her hand. Firstly, there are restrictions at the bottom of the well. Secondly, the temperature is much lower than on the ground. It is like a natural freezer, making the originally dead body decay much slower than an ordinary corpse. Furthermore, coupled with the deep resentment here, after thousands of years, the corpse was only swollen and rotten, and did not turn into white bones. Lily just touched her palm, and now her palms were numb, and there seemed to be blood in the gaps between her fingernails. I can still recall that when I grabbed the rotten flesh on the face of this purple corpse, I felt like I was grabbing a handful of mud, and I couldn't get rid of it. But Lily didn't have time to care about this at the moment, because when she saw the scene under the well, her heart sank. The underground well was about 100 square meters wide and was in the shape of a bagua plate. Lily's eyesight was so good that she could see what was above the ground at a glance. Even though the surface of the stone chamber had been somewhat decayed after thousands of years, she could still see the ground clearly. Someone cut out the shape of the bagua disc, and it was surrounded by densely carved talismans. The ground was covered with some ancient incantations from ancient times. These were not the most important. The most important thing was that in the directions of these bagua discs, people were kneeling in every direction. looking at a tall and complete purple corpse that was restrained by the fire dragon. These corpses are located at the outermost periphery of the Bagua direction, bowing to the Tai Chi yin and yang in the middle, and between the black and white yin and yang is a brown-red coffin. Although the color is no longer bright due to age, the lily when I saw this scene, my heart tightened. No wonder the layout of this place is so large. There are dragon snakes guarding the gate before entering the tomb. After entering the tomb, the number of dead people buried is unimaginable. First there is the blood pool above, followed by these purple corpses at the bottom of the well. A single purple corpse already possesses such a powerful strength. Lily almost suffered a loss just now, not to mention that there are 7 more purple corpses here. These corpses seem to be worshipping the corpse in the middle, as if guarding it. Lily had heard of the scene before when she first entered the world of Mission, but had never seen it with her own eyes. In ancient times, most people were buried in black coffins. There were only 2 situations when they were buried in red coffins. One was a relative of the emperor, and the other was a very evil thing. If the black coffin could not suppress it, Taoist priests would smear the coffin with cinnabar to ward off the evil. The layout of this place is so large, the things in the coffin may have already become spirits, and her hunch was indeed correct. These seemingly fierce purple corpses in front of me are probably not the most powerful. The most terrifying thing is probably the corpse in the red coffin in the middle. Although there is no movement at this time, if it is disturbed, Lily will no longer want to knock deeply. Trouble. Lily smiled bitterly, seeing the purple corpse fighting with the fire dragon in the air. Although the fire dragon temporarily restrained the purple corpse's movements, the purple corpse was extremely fierce. After struggling desperately, the corpse was in his mouth. Chi continued to spurt out, still consuming the energy of the fire dragon. At this moment, the light on the fire dragon was much dimmer than before. The people behind kept squeezing, and Lily jumped to the ground. The mineral water bottle she had thrown out before was still there. In one Bagua grid, the other purple corpses seemed not to feel her actions. They were still kneeling on the ground devoutly like stone sculptures, with their heads nodding. But once Lily walked out of the Bagua grid of the corpse, the original corpse, the purple corpse lying quietly on the ground, suddenly seemed like an enraged beast. He let out a roar in his mouth, jumped up and rushed towards Lily with a fishy stench. She exited the Bagua grid very quickly. When the corpse was about to reach the boundary, it suddenly stopped, as if something trapped it, preventing it from crossing the boundary. It just opened a pair of eyelids that had long been rotten, and only a pair of unusually green eyes were staring in Lily's direction, and a large amount of purple mist was sprayed out of its mouth, like an enraged beast, spinning uneasily on the spot. To be continued. Cannon Fodder Strategy. Author, Juan ERWR. Chapter 909. As soon as Lily jumped down to the bottom of the well, the second person was about to follow him, but he couldn't help urging him. However, as soon as Lily left, this person finally saw the light of fire in front of him. Before he could jump down, he saw the scene in front of him. So frightened that he let out a thrilling scream. Ah! In panic, this man almost fell to the bottom of the well. The people behind him didn't know what was going on and kept pushing forward. The middle-aged man screamed repeatedly. "Stop squeezing, stop squeezing." He was so frightened that he couldn't even say the word ghost, but who would listen to him at this time? He had tasted Lily's previous pain, holding onto the wall of the well with both hands and not daring to go down. But even though he tried his best to stabilize his body, the people behind him were anxious and feared that the blood would surge up, so they didn't care about the front. Someone yelled something. Although this person tried his best to resist, he was still squeezed and rolled down to the bottom of the well involuntarily. As soon as he rolled down, he was covered in dust. Although the bottom of the well was not deep at this time, only about 1 meter high, but it still hurt, but the middle-aged man didn't care about it. After seeing Lily, he ran towards her desperately. Ah. The situation of the third person who followed was similar. Lily looked at the scene in front of her, her heart heavy. She saw that the fire dragon in front of her was about to be unable to tie up the purple corpse, that extremely fierce corpse. With most of his skin burnt and black-purple pus flowing out of his body, he actually dragged the fire dragon step by step toward Lily and the others. The firelight reflected its face, which was enough to give people nightmares. The faces of the few people who had just been squeezed into the bottom of the well were wailing. Every time it took a step, its bare feet would drag out a purple-black footprint on the ground. Its behavior made the people who came down even more frightened. They all cried and crowded around Lily, as if they were afraid that she would leave them alone and let others run away. The middle-aged man who came down first even stretched out his hand to catch her. Lily thighs. Lily was deeply afraid that these people who had been squeezed down would run around at will, wake up all the corpses, and cause trouble later. When she saw the middle-aged man's behavior, she shouted, "Don't move. I have corpse poison on my body, stay here." When the middle-aged man heard that she had corpse poison on her body, the outstretched hand quickly retracted, with a mournful face. "What should I do, what should I do? Master Yun, what should I do?" These people who were usually called masters came to call others masters at this time, and Lily couldn't laugh or cry. At this moment, I didn't have time to say more to them. It's safe on the well. It's impossible for these corpses to jump out of the bagua array. She originally wanted to say that the purple corpses in this grid had been entangled by her, and it was safe for the time being, but she didn't expect that the few people who were squeezed out heard Lily's words. As if he had received a glimmer of hope when he was dying, he jumped up without thinking, as if his butt was on fire, and tried desperately to climb up to the well platform. "Get back quickly! Get back!" These people were shouting, but it was useless for Lily to shout back just now, not to mention that several people wanted to go back now. When the people behind heard this, cursing. "If you are paralyzed, the weird blood from behind will flow. If you can, come and stand behind." The people in front kept shouting to stay back. Unexpectedly, the fear in the hearts of the people behind them caused everyone to huddle together in despair. The middle-aged man shouted loudly, "There are zombies here! There are zombies! Ah woo woo!" He shouted later. I couldn't help crying loudly. As soon as the people at the back heard that there were zombies here, the team suddenly became a mess. Everyone pushed and tried desperately to move back, but the blood did flow from the back. There are zombies in front and evil spirits behind. Everyone was dead at either end, and the cries in the tunnel at the bottom of the well were loud. Somehow, Lily turned her head and glanced at this extremely funny scene. If the situation was not critical at this moment, otherwise she would be really shocked when she saw such a situation. I can't help but sneer at the scene happening in front of me. The fire dragon binding the purple corpse became smaller and smaller, the light of the dragon body dimmed, and the light in the bagua array gradually dimmed again. Lily cast the dragon god curse again, and this time the fire dragon rushed out again to stop the purple corpse. And then she began to look at the ground intently. Many of the ancient characters here are unique to Taoism in ancient times. If it were anyone else, I'm afraid they wouldn't be able to understand it. However, Lily has stayed in Taoism for a long time during several missions. This piece of Bagua Jagong grid on the ground, she read all the talismans, and then groped for the fonts on the wall. The human skull lamps were still hanging on the walls. She simply lit up these lamps, and the stone chamber became brighter and brighter, but the eerie and terrifying the atmosphere did not recede with the rise of light. On the contrary, it became even more strange and gloomy because of the ignition of the green fire. There were spells and Taoist techniques painted on the wall. Lily groped around very quickly. There were no gaps or mechanisms here, which proved that there was no door on the stone wall. She even reached out and knocked on the stone wall. This stone wall is not hollow. After giving up the stone wall, Lily rose up in the air and touched the top of her head. The same was true for the top of her head. The top was very hard and there were no other mechanisms except the talisman. Lily was determined to not give up. Scurrying into the Bagua grid that had just brought the purple corpse to life, the purple corpse rushed toward her like crazy, its long black nails stretched out and extremely sharp. As usual, Lily trapped him with the Dragon God technique. She studied the spells in the grid, but there was no way out. She walked around all the Bagua grids without giving up, and almost all the 8 purple corpses were brought back to life by her. Wow, what she did was shocking. Anyone else would have been frightened to see these purple corpses, but most of them would have disappeared. However, she was brave enough to bring all these things to life, and she still dared to do it. Jumping up and down in this grid. It's a pity that there is no way out in all the Bagua grids. This is a dead end. In order to restrain these purple corpses, Lily has exhausted most of her mana. At this time, the purple corpses screamed huo huo and looked extremely ferocious. In the process of fighting the fire dragon, the bodies of these corpses have been burned to a terrible state, and the hair of several corpses has been singed, and their appearance looks more and more disgusting. It is a pity that these things have been dead for many years and are just like walking zombies, so they are subject to even though he was injured, he felt no pain. On the contrary, the restraint of the fire dragon stimulated its ferocity, making these things even more ferocious. Purple corpse gas was floating everywhere in the Bagua array, and the skull lamps around it were all lit by lilies, illuminating the formation like daylight. Are you crazy? Everyone had been crowding around the well platform for a long time. At this time, 2 people were squeezed down and could not climb up. The remaining person was blocked at the edge of the well, holding tightly to the edge of the well with both hands and refusing to jump down. One of the 2 people who landed was the middle-aged man who jumped down first, and the other was Tang Quan. The middle-aged man felt a little desperate when he saw Lily's action of activating these dead bodies. You clearly know that as long as you stay in the cell they won't wake up, so what are you trying to do to lure them back to life? These corpses looked hideous and terrifying. The middle-aged man and Tang Quan did not dare to be careless, fearing that they would be contaminated with corpse poison. They firmly caught their mouths with a cloth wrapped in glutinous rice to breathe, and followed Lily step by step. After all, the 2 people above the well platform could not get up at this time. Seeing Lily tying up these corpses with ease, naturally they did not dare to take half a step away from her side. However, with every step she took, Lily looked relaxed, but the middle-aged man's legs were weak. He was as thick as noodles and couldn't muster any strength. He followed Lily into a few squares and saw the purple corpses being brought to life one after another. Finally, the fear in his heart could no longer be endured and he couldn't help complaining loudly. You know these things are ferocious, why do you want to provoke them? The fear of these purple corpses made the middle-aged man cry out. Lily just looked back at him with a cold expression. The middle-aged man felt a chill in his heart and subconsciously did not dare to look at her. He turned his head away and then heard Lily say coldly, "You stay in the Bagua array all your life. How long can my magic power protect you? When my magic power is exhausted, the blood in the blood pool above flows down. Should we all wait to die together? Don't talk to show your low IQ, this will. What troubles me is that if you don't want to go out, you can stay in the grid and not move, but I have to find a way out." Her words made the middle-aged man who complained about her dare not speak anymore. Tang Quan sighed. He had only been down there for a short time, and the exposed skin on his body was already covered with a layer of green frost crystals. He covered his head and wearing a glutinous rice cloth bag, he asked, "Xiaoun, have you found a way out now? The people who set up the formation here are very smart. They are not only proficient in Taoism, but also have extensive research on the 5 elements and Bagua formation." It was Tang Quan who heard the question. Lily's face softened. She had the highest level of cultivation and practiced the authentic Tao Te Ching of the Heaven and Earth sect in her body. These corpse auras did not have a deep impact on her. She was even affected by the purple corpse before. The corpse poison was gradually fading away at this time. Lily paused while she was talking. The person beside the well who heard her trying to find a way out started to have his eyes brightened up. Then he heard that Lily had stopped moving. Not only did she not find a way out, she started to explain the formation. Come, at this critical moment, Mrs. Wen's voice rang out again. Can you stop showing off at this critical moment? Where is the road? Tell me quickly. The blood in the blood pool behind is coming soon. These people stood at the edge of the well, and the corpse energy was sealed in the Bagua array. They are safe for the time being, but their safety for a while does not mean that they will remain safe forever. If the blood from behind surges in, they will be forced into the bottom of the well, so their desire for escape is very close. Mrs. Wen Mr. and Mr. Wen were the most anxious. They still wanted to find their daughter, and they didn't want to die unjustly in this place. Moreover, it looked like they would die in a very miserable way, so they heard what Lily said about the Bagua array and Taoism. All the dissatisfaction and resentment in his heart burst out. If you have anything to say, please tell me quickly and stop talking nonsense, okay? To be continued. Carrot. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Cannon Fodder Strategy. Author, Juan Erwr. Chapter 910. Lily ignored Mrs. Wen's words. She also knew that the situation was urgent, but she wanted to discuss some issues with everyone first to avoid trouble later. Therefore, Mrs. Wen was desperately crying and screaming on the side, but she pretended not to hear it. This place is connected with each other. There are corpse slaves guarding each Bagua array. The Bagua arrays are mutually reinforcing each other. This is a place with sufficient spiritual energy that can nourish the things in it. Similarly, the grievances in these corpse slaves can also be mutually reinforcing. Everyone probably understands that each purple corpse seems to have its own fixed area of activity. Once it exceeds this Bagua grid, it can no longer cross the thunder pool, but Xiangsheng Tangquan doesn't understand. Although he was as anxious as Mrs. Wen at this time, he entered the ancient tomb all the way and saw Lily's character. She was not someone who showed off her skills at critical moments. Otherwise, she would not have been able to come in silently for so long. She has solved so many troubles for everyone, but she has never asked for credit, or even said a word of arrogance. Instead, she seems taciturn. There must be a reason why she said this now. Therefore, Tang Quan suppressed the panic in his heart and asked. I understand the mutual restraint, but what does mutual development mean? The meaning of mutual growth is that these corpses can nourish each other not only with their grievances, but also with each other, so that the strength of these corpse slaves greatly increases. Likewise, Lily said here and paused. If you didn't know what was going on and killed a purple corpse, the one in the middle might be alarmed. This was what she figured out after reading the spell before. Fortunately, she is already very proficient in Taoism, and she also has a basic understanding of the 5 elements and Bagua formation. Only then did I understand this formation. The person who set up this formation was not only proficient in Taoist magic and Bagua formation, but also had a meticulous mind, and could even think of such a trick. This is why Lily felt that she was in big trouble. Not only are these corpse slaves offering sacrifices to the things in the cinnabar coffin in the middle, I'm afraid even the blood on them is. Lily hardly needs to think about something that has been nourished by resentment and corpse energy for thousands of years. Then you can know how terrifying this thing is. If it is alerted, you can imagine how big the trouble will be. These seemingly fierce purple corpses are just insignificant things compared with the things in the middle. These purple corpses are just guarding the corpse slaves in the red coffin in the middle, To put it nicely, or to put it worse, they just provide a medium to warm and nourish the corpse in the middle. Most of the resentment and corpse poison collected over the past 1,000 years should be gathered in the coffin in the center of the Bagua array. After 1,000 years, even the corpse slaves have become so powerful, let alone the biggest thing among them. Lily suddenly couldn't help but smile bitterly. This mission was really unlucky. If she had been given an extra year and a half, she could have made more preparations. No matter how ferocious the thing inside was, even if she couldn't completely eliminate it, Lily was confident that it would not be difficult to escape, and she would not end up in such a situation where she seemed to be waiting to die. What should we do? Tang Quan asked, and a group of people above the wellhead began to push each other again. Mr. Wen at the front was sweating profusely, and Mrs. Wen standing behind him couldn't help but urge. Hurry up, hurry up. Since you know this, can you do it faster? We won't be able to withstand it anymore at this critical moment. Mrs. Wen's voice was filled with tears and despair. Lily's eyes gradually fell on the red coffin in the middle. The expression is uncertain. I have searched everywhere, and there is no way out. It is definitely impossible to retreat to the well. Once the blood pool behind is lured to life, it will be a sharp weapon to harvest lives. There was another dead end ahead, and beads of sweat dripped from Lily's forehead layer by layer. After a while, she narrowed her eyes and pointed to the coffin in the middle. This thing is in the center of the Bagua array. I want to lift it up and take a look. There is no retreat from the rear. The expert who set up this game does have some skills. He slowly led the group to this point like driving a sheep. This tomb is very well protected. From the various settings from the beginning, no matter whoever breaks in, even if he does not die from the mouth of the snake in front, he may be sealed to death in the sarcophagus in front. If he has some ability like Lily, he can get away with it. They managed to escape from the sarcophagus, but they still could not escape from the blood pool. Even if they could escape, they would only bring the blood pool back to life and be driven down to feed the corpses. The person who set up this formation has taken everything into consideration, including the fact that he should have thought that there would be tomb robberies hundreds or even thousands of years later. He did not take any precautions to make these trespassers die. This tomb, there are no terrible mechanisms to stop everyone, nor are there any dangerous trap designs. Instead, they take advantage of people's hearts and generously open the heart of the tomb in front of everyone, forcing a group of people to come down and treat those who trespass into the cemetery as food. Offer the things in this coffin. This kind of ability is not something ordinary people can have. Lily was cursed again and again in her heart at this time. She has done so many missions. Even if each mission seems difficult, there is still a glimmer of hope. But this time she was really forced to despair. Knowing that the things in this coffin are not easy to mess with, but currently besides moving the coffin that is at the center of the yin and yang of Tai Chi array, Lily can't think of any other idea. Hearing her say that she wanted to move the coffin to take a look, she had mentioned the ferocity of the corpse in the coffin before, and now she was going to touch it again. Everyone seemed to hear the sound in their ears. It was like a night story and felt extremely ridiculous, but after being so unbelievable, no one in the group was speechless. The only things that could be heard were the roars coming from Ziz's mouth and the sound of the rotting flesh rubbing against the ground as his feet moved under the ground as he struggled with the fire dragon. Everyone was silent for a while, and Tang Quan licking her dry lips, she said bitterly. Is there really no other way? Lily shook her head. She would definitely not be able to go back. If she could find another way, she would definitely not be willing to take the risk of doing this. She was more unwilling than anyone else to disturb the things in the coffin, but she couldn't. If she doesn't do this, there will be no way out. She has just checked it immediately. This stone wall seems to have been dug out of thin air. The water in the bloody pool above is about to flow down. If Lily is not mistaken, these bloody flows will down, it will definitely cause changes. In the process of finding the way, Most of the mana in her body has been consumed in order to restrain these corpse slaves and prevent them from reviving the corpses in the coffins. If she delays any longer, she will have to wait until her mana when it is exhausted. A group of people will all die here. These people are willing to wait for death, but she is not. She still wants to live and live well. Now she is more than just herself. She has not found Li Yangzi or obtained the whereabouts of Li Yangzi. She cannot die here. The expression on Lily's face gradually became resolute, and the muscles on Tang Quan's face twitched, and his expression fluctuated for a while before he gritted his teeth. It's done. There was a look of death in his eyes, and he said firmly, "Your father is still in prison now. When you go back, I have lived for most of my life, and I am worthy enough. If I die here, it is just a destiny. If it is Tai Tianzun has a spirit, and if he knows that his disciples are in such a situation, he will definitely show his spirit." He was obviously very panicked at this moment, and he even mentioned Tai Tianzun's name. Lily nodded, gritted her teeth, and walked towards the center of the Bagua array. Tang Quan stiffened his body and followed behind her. The middle-aged man covering his mouth was about to cry, his eyes were red, but he was helpless. Although he didn't dare to get close to the red coffin, he might still have a chance to survive by following Lily. But if he was allowed to stay here alone, let alone his ability to escape when something strange happened later. If he doesn't, even if those corpse slaves break away from those weird fire dragons, they will be enough to kill him. The middle-aged man's legs were limp, and they shook a few times with every step he took. When everyone on the stairs of the well saw this scene, their hearts almost rose to their throats, but no one dared to come over to help. When the corpse slaves trapped by the fire dragon saw Lily and the others approaching the coffin, their roars became more urgent and their movements gradually became louder. Some even tried desperately to come over. These purple corpses were just corpse slaves. That's it? The so-called corpse slaves are these things who will be extremely loyal to the person in the coffin before they die and voluntarily become the slaves of the person in the coffin. Even after death, the soul is trapped in the corpse, loses its mind, and cannot escape forever, becoming a walking zombie. Still only loyal to the person in the coffin. These corpse slaves are not like ordinary zombies, who have bloodthirsty and ferocious impulses such as killing. Their only belief is to protect the people in the coffins until they are wiped out. The strength of these corpse slaves may not be very strong, but the scary thing is because these people had already planted the idea of being loyal to one person before they died. This belief will not change with the passage of time, nor will it change because after time passes, there will be a being with greater strength than the person in the coffin. Afraid of escaping, even if they encounter a higher level existence than themselves, if that existence wants to harm the person in the coffin, these corpse slaves will try their best until the physical body disappears completely. Corpse slaves are a very difficult thing to deal with. Not everyone can refine this kind of thing. These corpse slaves must be required to devote themselves wholeheartedly to the people in the coffins while they are alive. It is human nature to be selfish. No matter how selfless a person is, there will always be sometimes people will have their own thoughts and selfishness, but to become a corpse slave, selfishness is absolutely necessary. Although there are only 8 corpse slaves here, it can be seen that these corpse slaves were all tall and powerful when they were alive. Moreover, not everyone can become a corpse guarding slave, and it also depends on whether the horoscope is suitable. In ancient times, it was extraordinary for a nobleman to be guarded by a corpse slave after his death. There are actually 8 corpse slaves here, and it is possible. The master who arranged this place was asked to set up a cemetery for him. It is conceivable that the dead person in the coffin had an extraordinary status when he was alive. To be continued. Cannon Fodder Strategy. Author, Juan ERWR. Chapter 911. Lily's behavior of approaching the middle coffin seemed to have touched the scales of these corpse slaves, making them all become irritable and restless. The middle-aged man followed Lily fearfully. Every step he took was as if he was 1 foot closer to death. The desperate and lifeless aura could be easily felt through the coffin. Several people felt the bone-eroding coldness after entering the Tai Chi Yin and Yang center. Tang Quan's gray beard and hair slowly formed black frost crystals. The middle-aged man had the lowest cultivation level. At this time, black energy appeared even on his finger joints. The hand covering his mouth seemed to be a little unruly. The glutinous rice bun that was originally covered with a layer of green crystal suddenly turned a little gray and black. Lily is the strongest, but she has the deepest sense of danger. At this moment, she is just close to Tai Chi Yin Yang, not touching the coffin. The ferocious aura is already so obvious, and the things in the coffin must not be messed with. As they got closer, they discovered that the coffin was unexpectedly large. It was almost no smaller than the sarcophagus that trapped Lily before. They didn't notice it when they looked at it from a distance. Now that they got closer, they realized that the coffin was even bigger. It can even hold 4 or 5 people. I don't know what the coffin body is made of. After being stored for so many years, it has been corroded by the yin qi, resentment, and corpse qi, but it is still not rotten. However, the color of the cinnabar on it is lighter, which shows that the coffin itself is something weird. Several lifelike relief dragons hovered above the coffin, either raising their heads and wagging their tails, or looking back with ferocious expressions. The dragon's body was painted with cinnabar, and it did not lose its vigor because of the passage of time. On the contrary, it's those eyes painted red that make people feel chilly. The head is only slightly tilted, and looking at it from another angle gives the impression that these dragons have come to life and are carrying the coffin. The Longmua man looked over. Then I felt a ferocious aura coming towards my face, and just one look at it could scare people to the point of sweating from their foreheads. This coffin was indeed evil. In ancient times, things like dragons were not something everyone could use. Thinking about the generosity in this tomb, and seeing the dragons carrying coffins today, even if they are not real dragons, they may be decorated with cinnabar, making these relief dragons have a bit of the charm of real dragons. This method in itself is extremely unnatural. Lily only glanced at it and then stopped looking at it to avoid consuming her mental energy. She lowered her head, her heart sinking a little more. "Which of you come here again, please help me?" Lily turned around and shouted. The coffin was far bigger than she imagined. She reached out and slowly put it on it, very slowly. The middle-aged man on the side stared at her hand with a pale face. Tang Quan was also tense all over, and subconsciously placed his hand on his waist bag filled with iron sand and various items. Lily also licked her dry lips, drew a spell in the air with one hand, and clasped it in the palm of her hand. One hand approached at an extremely slow speed. It was just such a simple action, and it only took a few breaths from the hand to touch the coffin, but sweat dripped down layer after layer on several people's bodies. Finally, Lily's fingertips touched the coffin itself, but it was quiet inside. Yes, there was no movement. Lily felt relieved at first. Then the palm of his hand completely touched it. I originally thought that the coffin body would be extremely cold, but unexpectedly, the coffin itself was not very cold, at least compared to the gloomy air surrounding it. Even if the coffin feels like normal temperature to the touch, it is extremely cold in the surroundings. The coffin also seemed to have become warmer. Lily was a little surprised. She tried to push, but the coffin didn't move at all. She didn't dare to bring up her spiritual power for fear of disturbing the things in the coffin. Her move of pushing the coffin made the middle-aged man's forehead sweat pour down like a waterfall. The middle-aged man's eyes were red with anxiety, but he did not dare to say anything. Lily gradually became more courageous. At first, she just pushed the coffin. Later, I just pressed my shoulder against him to try harder. When the middle-aged man saw this scene, he was so frightened that the glutinous rice bun he was holding almost fell to the ground. He hurriedly covered it with both hands, almost blocking his breath. He replied later. After a while, he loosened his hand a little, but he choked on his own saliva. At this moment, he didn't dare to cough. His face turned red, and he could only shout in a hoarse voice. "Slow down, slow down. Come here, help me." Lily was calm at this time. Although the things in the coffin had been supported by violent energy, they didn't seem to have woken up. She pushed several times, causing the middle-aged man to tremble violently, and the surrounding people shivered. The purple corpse went crazy and sprayed out a lot of corpse poison from its nostrils and mouth, but it was silent inside the coffin. Be gentle, be gentle." The middle-aged man felt that his heart was beating very fast at this time. The blood in his body was running faster, and the blood vessels in his brain were pulsing. He seemed to feel it very clearly. Somewhat disobedient, he could only keep repeating these two words in his mouth, and nervously stepped forward under Lily's pressure. However, he covered his mouth with one hand, and the other was covered in sweat. When he touched the coffin, his whole body was filled with sweat. It seemed that he was about to die, and how could he lift the coffin? Lily frowned, glanced at him with disgust, and then turned to look at the group of people standing by the well platform. There are now 15 people alive, including Lily. There are 3 people below, and there are still people standing by the well platform. There are 12 people. If all these people come down and work together, they may not be able to lift the coffin. Thinking of this, Lily turned and glanced upward. "Come here quickly, otherwise if time is delayed any longer, no one will survive." Her voice was not loud, but it could be heard very far in the stone chamber. In addition, the stone chamber was completely sealed, and her voice was accompanied by everyone could hear the echo clearly. But in times of crisis, even though they knew Lily was right and there was danger below, and the edge of the well platform was considered a safe place for the time being, no one was willing to come and help. As soon as Lily said this, everyone fell silent. Even Mrs. Wen, who had just urged Lily to go faster, did not dare to speak out. Seeing such a scene, Lily sneered. "We are going to die, do you think you can survive on your own? Not to mention the ferocious thing in the coffin, even if the thing in the coffin was not awakened, but these 8 extremely ferocious corpse slaves, it's not that Lily looked down on this group of trash, it's just because of their inferior spells, it's not like this at all. The opponent of the purple corpse, once his mana is exhausted here, he may not necessarily wait until the water from the blood pool above flows down. These corpse slaves who have been brought back to life can also force this group of people into a desperate situation." As soon as she said these words, the crowd who had not come down suddenly hesitated. As time passed by, the middle-aged people below saw such a scene, feeling panic and fear in their hearts, and cursed again and again. "Come and help me, I will kill your ancestors." "I'll do it," a familiar male voice rang out from the edge of the well. Mr. and Mrs. Wen, who were originally blocking the edge of the well, were pushed and staggered. People behind them kept crowding, and Mr. Wen, who was standing in front, finally unable to hold on, he turned sideways and clung to the edge of the well. Mrs. Wen in his arms lost her support and screamed and fell to the ground. Fortunately, she was at the edge of the well earlier. He was prepared to cover his mouth with something, otherwise it would fall down and stain the air with purple corpse aura, and he would probably lose his life here in a short time. The fat middle-aged man named Chang Sheng, who was the former Mr. Wen beside the well, looked like he was about to die. He took out a glutinous rice bag from the package and covered his mouth. He took a deep breath and jumped down. "Come to the well." Mrs. Wen fell into the well at this time and saw the corpse slave restrained by the fire dragon. She screamed repeatedly and rolled around, trying to climb back up to the well platform. However, the people behind quickly squeezed over and there was no more left beside the well. The position allowed her to get up. She trembled with her legs and shouted with a cry. "Husband, husband." She called out again and again, her voice becoming more urgent and frightened each time. Mr. Wen was crowded by the well platform at this time, and his originally elegant and gentle face turned red. He was beaten until his face was bruised, but now he was squeezed even more. Her face was distorted, and she could hardly bear the sight. Lily suddenly felt something in her heart and shouted. "Wait a minute," she turned around and walked towards the well platform. The middle-aged man and Tang Quan who stayed behind were trembling and hurriedly followed. Lily took out cinnabar and talisman paper from her bag, quickly drew a talisman, and jumped. She went up to the edge of the well platform and signaled Mr. Wen to come out first. The talisman paper in her hand was first lit with the samadhi true fire, and then she roughly pulled Mr. Wen over and stuffed the talisman paper into his mouth. Mr. Wen didn't expect that she would do this. When the talisman entered his mouth, it was so hot that tears almost rolled out of his eyes. Lily held his mouth, but he couldn't spit it out. His mouth was so hot that it sizzled. There was a loud noise, but Lily's hand grasped his face like a steel claw, and his hand was tightly grasping the wall of the well, unable to struggle away. When Mrs. Wen saw the scene below, she couldn't help shouting. "What are you doing? He was injured before, and there is a smell of blood. The smell of blood in this place may cause the things in the coffin to come to life." Lily originally didn't want to pay attention to Mrs. Wen, but now she frowned and said one sentence. "I sealed his aura." "Has anyone else been hurt?" she asked. Mrs. Wen heard that she did this for the safety of her husband. Although she felt sorry for her husband's suffering, she no longer asked. "But it is inevitable to complain. Since you are here to help him, why don't you wait until the talisman paper is extinguished before feeding it into your mouth? What's more, there is no scientific basis for eating talisman ashes, and I don't know if it will work." She muttered in her mouth. Lily said this she was too lazy to explain so much to her, and just looked back at her. Mrs. Wen was so frightened by the sight that she didn't dare to speak out. To be continued.